Begin today the Gemara on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis, about 10 lines from the bottom of the Yomad. So we had over here a Mishnah and then a Braisa that were a contradiction. In the Mishnah here it says that there are certain women that we know that there's a certain hatred between them. So therefore they're not believed to come and say that your husband passed away. Because they may be saying this testimony just to mess up this woman. She'll go and get married to someone else. Then her husband will show up. And then she'll be completely messed over. She won't be able to live not with the new husband, not with the old husband. That's the halacha. So we don't trust them. But if they're delivering a get, the Mishnah says that we do trust them, that the get is a good get, that they didn't do any forgery here, and she's divorced. But then in a Braisa, though, it said, no, just like these women that have a certain hatred are not believed to say that your husband passed away, they're also not believed to deliver the get. So the Gemara asked, how do we explain the difference between the Mishnah and the Braisa? Rav Yosef says that the difference is that the Mishnah is speaking about a get that's being brought in Eretz Yisrael. So the get that's being brought in Eretz Yisrael, so we're just looking at the actual get itself. You don't have to testify anything. You just give the get and she's divorced. So therefore, these women that bring this get is believed. But a get that's being brought from Chutz La'aretz, so over here, they have to testify that the get was written and signed in front of them. If they have to testify, so then these women that have a certain hatred are not going to be believed. And that's why the Braisa is speaking about Chutz La'aretz and they won't be believed. That was the way Rav Yosef resolved this contradiction. Abaye here is going to say the exact opposite as Rav Yosef. Let's see. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye argues and says to Rav Yosef, Adarabah. On the contrary, the answer to the contradiction of the Mishnah and the Braisa will be the opposite. Ipchem mistavre. Logically, you should say the opposite. If there's any concern about these women coming and lying and trying to mess this woman up because they hate her, so then you should say as follows. Ba'aretz, when they deliver a get for her in Eretz Yisrael, the asibal, when the bottom of Chav Gimel Amud Beis, got it? Chav Gimel Amud Beis at the bottom. So in Eretz Yisrael, the asibal ma'are. After they give her the get, they did not testify. In Eretz Yisrael, there's no obligation to testify about the authenticity of the get. So if the Baal comes later and is ma'arer and he's going to challenge this get and he's going to say that this get is possible, what's going to happen? Mashkechinam pay. We're going to have to pay attention to what the Baal says. The get is going to be put on hold. The get is going to be possible. The Baal has an opportunity to come and passel this get. No one ever testified that this get is good. So the ikila meimar, over here, it's possible to say likulkula kamachavna, that these women that are bringing this get, they are bringing the get and they're trying to ruin things for her. Why are they trying to ruin things for her? Because when the Baal, Chav Gimel, okay, and because since the get was brought and nobody testified b'fanei nichtav b'fanei nechtam, so now it's possible that later on she's going to suffer from this, because then the Baal is going to come and say that the get is possible and she's going to be stuck. So maybe these women that hate her and are bringing her a get in Eretz Yisrael, they're doing it with this in mind, that she's going to have trouble from this later. So therefore, loy mehemne. So a get delivered in Eretz Yisrael, they should not be believed. But b'chutz la'aretz, if they deliver a get from chutz la'aretz, what happens? When you bring a get from chutz la'aretz, you can't give it to her without testifying b'fanei nichtav b'fanei nechtam, that it was written and signed in front of them. And what happens then? The asibal ma'aretz. So if later on the husband shows up and will try to challenge the kashrus of the get, we're not going to look at him at all. So mehemne. So over here, in this case, they don't have the ability b'chlal to mess her up. It's impossible. So over here, you can't say, oh, these women hate her and they're trying to mess her up. They can't. So there's nothing to be concerned about. There's no reason why not to believe them. So that's why in our Mishnah, when it says that the get that's brought by these women that hate her and still they're believed, says Abaye, it makes sense to say that they were bringing the get from Chutz La'aretz, and because they're testifying b'fanei nichtav b'fanei nechtam, so what should we be concerned about? There's nothing that can go wrong after this, and therefore even they themselves have no intention to try to mess her up. That's the pshat in our Mishnah. The Gemara brings Tanya Kavasei da Abaye. We learned in the Braisa that says, like Abaye said, Rab Shimon ben Elazar Rab Shimon ben Elazar said, Mishum Rabbi Akiva, in the name of Rabbi Akiva. Isha nemenes lahavi gita, a woman is believed to bring her own get and to testify about her own get and say that this is a good get, b'kal v'chaymer, with the following kal v'chaymer. If when it comes to those women, because of a certain hatred that they have for this woman, they're not believed to say that her husband died, but nevertheless, namanis lahavi gita. But they are believed to bring her get and say, here, this is a good get, and get divorced with this get. So a woman herself, she is believed to say that her husband died. That's the halacha. If a woman comes and says that I know that my husband died, she's believed, and she can go ahead and get married to someone else. So for sure, for sure, she should be believed to bring her own get, to say that she's divorced. Now, this Braisa continues and says, since you're learning out this, that she's believed to bring her own get, from this, that you're saying that she's believed to say, when she brings her get, she's believed to say that this is her get. Where's your source? Where are you learning this out from? You're learning it out from this, that she's believed to bring her get from chutz la'aretz. So So just like all those people, any of these women that are bringing this get for her, and they may hate her, but they're believed. Why are they believed? They're believed because they are testifying that the get was written and signed in front of them. So too, a woman that brings her get from chutz la'aretz, she'll be believed that this is her get and it's kosher, but she has to testify that it was written and signed in front of her. So right here, the way this Braisa explains this halacha, that women that bring a get, even though they might hate her, but nevertheless we trust them that this is a good get. What does this Braisa say? The reason, the case over here is that they're testifying. Once they testify that, there's nothing that can go wrong with this get. There's no way this woman could ever be messed over. Even if the husband himself shows up and argues and says this get is possible, we're not going to listen to him. That's what Chachamim instituted, that it's too late. She got the get, and it was already testified that it's kosher. So we clearly see in this Braisa that that's the case of our Mishnah, that it's a get that's brought from chutz la'aretz. Amar Ravashi. Ravashi adds to this even more. Correct. From the other women that are bringing a get for the Isha that hate her.
Is from mess, not from the...
No, but it is the manoshim. Look at the first words of the Kal V'chomer. Umanoshim. Just like all women. That's the Makim Shabasa. All other women that are not believed to say that her husband died, but they are believed to say that this is your get. So if we're learning from there, from all women, just like all women that bring her a get have to testify b'fan nechtam, she herself also has to testify b'fan nechtam. Amar Ravashi says, Masnisen namideka. Look at the Mishnah itself. You'll see the Mishnah itself shows you that we're speaking about a get that's being brought from chutz la'aretz. The Ketani, because the Mishnah says, Ha'isha atzma mevia gita. The next case of the Mishnah, the last case of the Mishnah says, a woman could bring her own get. The Mishnah concludes, but she will have to testify that it was written and signed in front of her. Shema Mino. So we clearly see from the last case of the Mishnah that we're speaking about a get that's being brought from chutz la'aretz. So the Gemara now goes back to Rav Yosef's pshat. Rav Yosef learned the opposite. Rav Yosef learned that this case of the Mishnah, when it speaks about these women that hate her, and still they're believed to bring her get, Rav Yosef said that this Mishnah is actually talking about in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says, if so, the question on Rav Yosef would be, Rav Yosef, now according to Rav Yosef, Reisha, V'Seife, B'chutz la'aretz, it would come out that the previous Mishnah and the end of this Mishnah are both talking about chutz la'aretz. Why is that? So the Gemara here is going back to something that Rav Yosef said in the previous Mishnah. This is on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. There, in the Mishnah of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, we learned yesterday, if you remember, the Mishnah spoke about a person that's blind delivering a get. And the Gemara said a person that's blind can't deliver a get. So Rav Yosef explained why not, because it's being brought from chutz la'aretz. And you have to testify that I saw the writing of the get, and you can't testify that if you're blind. So that Mishnah is talking about chutz la'aretz. And the second case over here in our Mishnah, Ha'isha Atzma, when she brings her own get, the Mishnah clearly is talking about chutz la'aretz. It says that she has to testify that it was written in front of her. That's only in chutz la'aretz. But mitziyasa, the middle case, which is the first case of this Mishnah in Chav Gimel Amud Beis, that's ba'aretz. That's speaking about Eretz Yisrael. So why would the Mishnah teach the halachas in this way, that you have, it inserts in the middle a case of Eretz Yisrael? So Rav Yosef answers this is true. Reisha, V'Seife, B'chutz la'aretz, the earlier Mishnah, and the last case over here in this Mishnah are both speaking about a get brought from chutz la'aretz. And mitziyasa, the middle case here is ba'aretz, is speaking about Eretz Yisrael. Even though it seems to be interesting that the Tana does in this order, but that's the pshat in the Mishnah. And he brings a raya from the lashon of the Mishnah. He says, Mimai, how do I know this? Midiktani, what does it say in the first case of our Mishnah? It says, Ma ben get lemisa. The Mishnah asks, what is the difference between these women bringing a get for her, and they are believed, or misa, when they testify that her husband died, that they're not believed? So what does the Mishnah say? Shahaksav moichiach, because by the get, you have the actual document that shows that she's divorced, and we're not concerned that that's going to be a forgery. V'loikatani, the Mishnah does not say shahaksav upet moichiach. The Mishnah does not say that you have the writing of the get and also the testimony of b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechta. If it was speaking about a get that's brought from Chutz La'aretz, why doesn't the Mishnah say that besides the actual get itself, you also have the testimony by mouth that they're saying b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechta? The Mishnah does not say that. Therefore, that shows that the Mishnah is speaking about Eretz Yisrael. That's Rav Yosef's pshat. But Rashi here says Abaye doesn't learn this way, and Abaye does not consider this to be a raya at all, because when the Mishnah asks Ma ben get lemisa, what the Mishnah is asking is, what's the difference between the testimony of a get and the testimony of misa? By a misa, these women come and say your husband died, and by a get, these women come and say here b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechtam. So the Mishnah doesn't have to spell out the word peh. It's already part of the question. When it asks ma ben get lemisa, it's asking what's the difference between the peh of get and the peh of misa. And the answer is that by a get you have a document. So therefore, according to Abaye, this could be speaking about a get that's being brought from Chutz La'aretz. Okay, now the Gemara goes to the last case of the Mishnah. You have it? We're on the Chav Daled Amud Aleph. Ha'isha atzma. Okay? Ha'isha atzma. Right there. Okay. So this is the last case of the Mishnah that says that a woman could deliver her own get from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, but when she comes to Eretz Yisrael, she's going to have to testify, just like anyone that brings a get from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, she's going to have to testify that it was written and signed in front of her. So the Gemara asks on this, but Isha, a woman that's bringing her own get, as soon as she received the get from her husband in Chutz La'aretz, Igrishalah. She's already divorced. Once she's already divorced, there's no halacha of saying b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechtam. She's not a shliach. The halacha of saying b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechtam is only for a shliach. And the Rishonim explain that the main reason for testifying b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechtam is that we're afraid that otherwise the husband may show up and challenge the authenticity of this get. But if the husband knows that the moment he gives the get to his wife, she's already divorced, he removes his mind from this, and he knows it's over. And he's not going to come to be ma'arid. He's not going to try to make any problems. So therefore, there's no reason to testify anymore. So why would a woman have to say b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechtam? So here there's going to be a long discussion in the Gemara to describe exactly what the case is, and the Gemara is going to try to point out that she's not yet divorced. She's only getting divorced in Eretz Yisrael, and then is when she has to say b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechtam. So Ravona says, the husband told her, Loitis garshi boy, I'm giving you the get right now, but you shouldn't. It's a condition. You're not going to be divorced. Ela b'fnei bezdin ploni. Only when you arrive to this bezdin in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, she's not divorced as soon as she got the get into her hands. So therefore, she has to say b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechtam when she arrives in Eretz Yisrael. But the Gemara asks on this, sof, but still, at the end, the question remains. Because kimat yila hasam, the moment she does arrive to that bezdin in Eretz Yisrael, Igrishalah, just by her arrival there, she becomes divorced from this that she got to get in the beginning. It's just a condition, but then the moment she gets there and she arrived and she fulfilled her condition, she gets divorced right away. So again, she's not a shliach. She got divorced right away. So why should she have to testify about this get? B'fanei nichta b'fanei nechta. Elam Rav Huna bar Manoyach. So Rav Huna bar Manoyach adds and says, Mishmei de Rav Acha berei de Rav Ikke. The Amala, the husband said to her something more. He said to her, Ki matis hasam, when you arrive to that bezdin, you're not going to become divorced automatically by this that you already got to get into your hands from before. But when you arrive there, asnechei are, put the get down on the ground or on the counter, and then v'shakle, then pick up the get again, and only then, when you pick up the get again, that's when you're going to be divorced. So because it's now, when she picks it up, that she's becoming divorced, so now she's going to have to testify, b'fanei nichta b'fanei nechtam. She's not divorced from this that her husband already gave it to her before. But the Gemara asks, this doesn't work. If so, she won't be divorced at all. Because if so, have a late ligitach mal gabi karka. This is compared to a case which we'll see later in the Masechta, if a husband does not give the get to his wife in her hands directly or to her domain directly. He places it on the ground and he tells her, here, pick up your get from the ground. She's not going to be divorced. Rava says, a husband that tells his wife, pick up your get from the ground, he has said nothing. As Rashi says, the Torah says, v'nosan b'yoda. He has to give it into her hands. You can't put it on the ground and have her pick it up from the ground. So over here, you can't say that the husband told her that put it down and then pick it up again. So what are we talking about? Once the husband gave it to her already in Chutz La'aretz, so she's divorced because of that she received it in her hands there. So even if there's a condition, but she's divorced because of she's holding it in her hands the whole time from before. So why would she have to testify? Ella says the Gemara will have to say the case over here is the Alma law. He told her, "Have shliach lo hilache." You are a shliach to deliver the get for yourself. Ad matis hasam, until you arrive in Eretz Yisrael, and then v'chimatis hasam, when you arrive to Eretz Yisrael. So in other words, a husband is telling her, even though you're the wife that has to receive the get to be divorced, but I'm not giving you the get as a wife to receive it. I'm only giving it to you as a shliach to deliver the get. Interesting thing. She is the wife, but the husband is saying, I'm not giving it to you as the wife. I'm giving it to you as a shliach to deliver the get. Now, when you arrive at Eretz Yisrael, v'chimatis hasam have a shliach lekabbalah. The kabbalah is gitech. As soon as you come to Eretz Yisrael, and the bezdin, so over there, you become a shliach lekabbalah, then you will receive the get for you yourself, become the shliach to receive the get for yourself, and you don't have to give it to anyone else. You're the isha, you're the wife itself, and you receive the get for yourself. So since she is delivering the get as a shliach, she did not receive the get originally as the wife, so you have to say b'fanich b'fanei she's a shliach delivering the get. But the Gemara asks on this, you can't say this because there's no concept of shlichus that works this way. So there's a problem with the shlichus itself. Why not? Because v'ha lechazra shlichus eitzel abal. This is a kind of a shlichus where the shliach cannot return to the husband. What does this mean? So there's many pirushim here in the Rishonim, and what this line of the Gemara here means. Rashi says that a rule by shlichus is that shlichus only works if it's an outside person that's a shliach that gets appointed by the mishaleach and fulfills his shlichus, and when he's done with his shlichus, he can go back to the husband and tell him, I did your shlichus, it's done. That's when he can be a shliach. This woman here that is becoming a shliach for her husband, and then she herself turns into being the one that is receiving the get. So once she becomes the recipient of this get, she can never go back to the husband and say, I fulfilled your shlichus. The moment she turns into the one that is receiving the get, so then the original shlichus sort of stops. It stops at a certain point, and now she becomes the isha back herself. She is the isha that the husband is giving the get to. So she's not an outside party that's receiving this get and going back to the husband and saying, I fulfilled the shlichus. Now she becomes the isha herself that's receiving the get. And if she's receiving the get, she has nothing to do with a shliach being sent from the husband to deliver the get. So there's no shlichus in such a kind of a way. So if there's no shlichus here, so then how could you say that the husband is telling her to be a shliach lo ilacha? So therefore the Gemara answers, you must say that the Omar law, what the husband told her is, have a shliach lo hilacha. You should be a shliach to deliver the get. So again, the same point, he gave her the get, and she's not receiving it as the wife, but she's a shliach to deliver it. Ad matis hasam, until you come to Eretz Yisrael. V'chimatis hasam, and when you come to Eretz Yisrael, so you cannot receive it automatically, but then what you have to do is, shavi shliach, shavi shliach lekabbalah. You go and appoint somebody else that will receive the get for you. Not you become the recipient of the get, but somebody else will receive the get for you. And so the husband sends her to deliver the get, and he tells her that you should go and appoint someone else to receive the get. Only if you fulfill these conditions will you be divorced. If you yourself are going to receive the get, you're not going to be divorced. Okay, so then it comes out that she has to say b'fanei nechtam when she brings this get to Eretz Yisrael, and because she's not receiving the get at all, she's not Ugereshes when she got the get before. Now she appoints a shliach lekabbalah, and then she's going to have to say b'fanei nechtam. But the Gemara says this doesn't necessarily work because we have a machlokes about this later in the Masechta. This will only work according to the opinion that says that Isha Oisa Shliach, a woman can appoint a Shliach lekabel gita to receive her get miyad Shliach baila from a Shliach that the husband sent. But there is an opinion that says Ein Isha Oisa Shliach lekabel gita miyad Shliach baila. A woman, a wife cannot appoint a shliach to receive the get that her husband sent to her with a shliach. So the ma'ikal meima. What are we going to say? You can't say that this is the case over here. In other words, we'll see later in the Gemara here is going to bring the reasons in a moment. But basically, according to one opinion, if the husband wants to give the get directly to the isha, so she could say, no, I want it to only a shliach, my shliach, to receive the get for me. But if the husband is sending a shliach to give the get to the isha, then the isha is going to have to accept it into her hands directly. She can't send a shliach to receive the get from her, from the shliach that the husband sent to give her the get. You can't have two shluchim that are going to meet to receive the get. The shliach of the husband to meet the shliach of the isha to receive it. If the husband sends a shliach, it has to go directly into her hands. That's one opinion. So we can't say that over here, the case over here is that the husband is telling the isha, you be a shliach lahaylacha, and then you are going to give it over to a shliach lekabbalah to receive the get for you. No, she has to receive it directly herself. So if so, that can't be the case here. So the Gemara says no, but that argument doesn't necessarily apply to our case. Why not? What is taka the reason? Why can't the isha appoint a shliach to receive a get from a shliach that the husband appointed when he sent the get to her? So the reason is mishum de'ikib b'zayin the bal. Because the husband feels humiliated by this. Why? Because the husband says, I'm sending a get to her with a shliach, and by her sending a shliach to pick up that get, that shows that she doesn't want to receive the get directly. So the husband is very particular about this. He gets humiliated by this. He wants her to receive the get directly, not through a shliach. But over here, if the husband is the one that made this very condition, he's the one that said that it should be done this way, so Baal Lekapit, obviously the husband is not particular about this. He wants that she should be a shliach lohayloche to deliver the get to Eretz Yisrael, and then she herself should go ahead and point the shliach to receive it, and she should not receive the get herself. The husband himself is demanding this. So therefore, this is not a problem. The get could take effect this way. So therefore, that could be the case. But the Gemara goes on further. There's another opinion about this. This is a good explanation. This could be true if the only concern we have over here is that the husband feels humiliated by the fact that the woman is not receiving the get into her own hands. But there's another opinion that says that there's a gzeira here, that Chazal will geyser, and that is mishum chatzeira haba la'achar mikain. Because this case over here should not be confused with a chotzer that comes to her, that becomes her chotzer after the get was placed into her chotzer. Michael and Meimar, what are we going to say? So what does this mean? What is this case of chotzer habal la'achar mikain? So over here there's also machlokes about this. What Rashi explains, the pshat over here is, what happens if a husband places a get into a chotzer that does not belong to his wife? So she's not kainet yet, it belongs to someone else. But then, after that, the woman goes and acquires this chotzer. Will she be divorced with this get that was placed into her chotzer? No, she's not divorced by it, because when the get was placed into the chotzer, it did not belong to her. Right? So now, but you may make a mistake over here and say that if a husband could send a get with a shliach lahaylacha, and then that shliach lahaylacha gives over the get to a shliach lekabbalah to receive the get for her, so a woman may say to herself, just like that works, I could maybe apply and say the same thing regarding this chotzer, that the chotzer is sort of a shliach. It's like another entity, similar to a shliach, which is another entity where the get is being sent to me. So she would think and say the chotzer is like a shliach where the get is being sent to me. So even if I don't own the chotzer yet, but if I acquire the chotzer later, then that chotzer will become now a shliach where I could receive the get through this chotzer. So in order not to confuse this, so therefore Chacham will geyser that you can't have a shliach la'ilacha give over the get to a shliach lekabbalah. We learned already before in the Gemara, shlichus and chotzer don't have the same halacha. By a shliach la'ilacha and a shliach lekabbalah, it is possible to have a husband send a get, and then the woman send then have a woman send the shliach to receive the get. It is possible, but by a chotzer, it's not going to work. By a chotzer, it has to be like her hand. She has to own the chotzer when the get is placed into the chotzer, like her hand, which is part of her. So therefore, in order not to confuse a chotzer with a shliach, Chachamim instituted that you can't send a shliach lekabbalah to pick up the get from the shliach lahilachem. So if so, we can't say that that's the case over here in this Mishnah. So what is the case over here in the Mishnah when it says that she's going to have to say b'fanei nechtam when she comes to Eretz Yisrael? So what is the case over here? It says the Gemara, the case over here is the husband said to his wife, Havei shliach lo ilacha adam matas. You are the shliach to deliver the get until you come to Eretz Yisrael. And then v'chimatis hasam, when you arrive to Eretz Yisrael, shavi shliach lo ilacha, appoint another shliach lo ilacha to deliver the get. The kabli is gitach minei, and he will give back the get to you. You will receive the get from him. So she's a shliach lo ilacha to deliver the get for herself, and then she's appointing another shliach lo ilacha to bring the get for her. But she's never appointing a shliach to receive the get for herself. She's just appointing another shliach to deliver the get for her, and that is allowed. And therefore, she's going to have to say b'fanei nechtam when she gives this get to the other shliach to deliver the get for her. Viba Yisayme, or the Gemara says another pshat, which is really very similar. The Amar Allah, the husband told her, Havei shliach lailach, you are a shliach to deliver the get to Eretz Yisrael, Adam Matasasam, till you arrive there in Eretz Yisrael. And now V'chimatasasam, when you arrive in Eretz Yisrael, Eimer kamei beidina, you should say in front of the Bezdin, B'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam, that this get was written and signed in front of you, Umashvi beidina shliach, and then the Bezdin will appoint another shliach to give this get for you. I want the Bezdin, the husband is saying, I want the Bezdin to appoint another shliach to give this get for you. So Taisus over here says that the previous pshat is saying that she can say b'fanei nichtav b'fanei nechtam when she gets the get back from the second shliach. And the second pshat over here is saying that she says b'fanei nichtav b'fanei nechtam before the Bezdin appoints the second shliach to give her the get. What's the point of this entire discussion over here? That we're talking about a get that a woman is bringing to Eretz Yisrael. It's her own get, but she's still not divorced. Not only is she still not divorced, she never received the get originally as the wife. She received the get originally only as a shliach. And then when she comes to Eretz Yisrael, she's not divorced automatically. She still has to give it to another shliach to deliver it for her. And therefore it's at that point, or at the point when she receives the get to be divorced, that she'll have to say b'fanei nichtav b'fanei nechtam. That's what the Mishnah was saying here. Hadron Allah hamevi get. This is the conclusion of the second peirik of Masechta Gittin hamevi get.
What happens
again? No. Okay. Teire hi. Yagdal teire v'yader. Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah. Very unusual case. Okay, we begin the next peirik, the third peirik, which will continue to discuss the halacha of a get being written lishma. That's which began already in the previous peirik. Kol get, sagt der Heilige Mishnah, Kol get shenichtav shaloi lishum isha. Any get that was written and it was not written for the purpose of this woman here, pasul. So it's going to be pasul because it was not written lishma. And here the Mishnah will say that this halacha applies in various different cases to different degrees. Okay, so what's one example for this? Person is walking in the marketplace. And he heard the voice of scribes that are calling out and are saying to write a get. And they're saying, Ish plini, megadish, is plinis, that write this get, that so-and-so is divorcing so-and-so, mimakam plini, from this city. And and this person says to himself, Zeshmi v'zeshem ishti. Hey, this is my name as well, and this is the name of my wife as well, and I live in this place as well. So I want to use this get that he overhears that is being prepared. So what's the halacha? Pasal l'garish, but it cannot be used as a divorce for him because it was written shaloi lishma. That's the first case. Now says the Mishnah, yes, mikain. The chiddush is even more. Cost of the Gadish Asishtai. Person writes a get and he wants to divorce his wife with this. So he told the Sefer to write a get to divorce his wife. But then V'nimlach. He changes his mind, he decides, no, I'm not going to use this get to divorce my wife. And then Batze Ben Yirai, another person from his city finds him, Vamalai, and he tells him, I heard that you wrote a get for your wife, and it doesn't look like you're using it. So Shmi Kishimcha, my name is like your name, Vishem Ishti Kishem Ishtucha, the name of my wife is the same as your wife's name, and I want to use the get that you wrote. So Pasal Lagadishba, it's also possible to use because it wasn't written Lishma. Furthermore, the Mishnah says, a third chiddush, a third case, Yasa Mikain, even more than this, Hayulay Shtei Nashim. What's if one person has two wives, B'Shem Yisei and Shavis, and the name of both of his wives are the same? So now, Kosav Legadish is a Gedoyla. He wrote to get to divorce a wife that's older, Legadish by Yisaktana. You can't use that same get to divorce another wife, which is a Katana, even though it's the same person that's writing a get, but it's two different wives. It has to be written L'Shem this particular Isha that he's divorcing. The Mishnah continues further. There's even bigger chiddush here. The fourth chiddush is Yesem Mikain Omru. Yesem Mikain, that is even more. There was said Omar lelavler. If a person says to the sefer, I have two wives. Naksoiv le'ezeh she'ertze agarish. Write a get, and whichever one of these two I decide to divorce, that's who I'll use it for. Pasal agarish by. Even then, it'll be possible to use this get to divorce any of these two wives. So Rashi over here explains, and as we'll see in the Hemshech and the Gemara, the chiddush of this last case over here is that you do not apply the concept of breire. Breire means that maybe we should say, if later on we see that he's using the get for one of his wives, so now it retroactively shows that that's really the one he had in mind all the time to divorce. So therefore it was written Lishma. But on that we say no. If at that time when he told the sefer, write a get and I'm not sure who I'm using it for, so at that time he didn't know. He says he has two wives. It's a problem to be married to two wives. So he decides he's going to divorce one of them, but he didn't know yet which one. So it's not considered to be that it's written Lishma.
Both the same name.
They both have the same name, obviously, right? Okay, so the Gemara comes back now to the first case of the Mishnah. What was the first case of the Mishnah? He overheard the Seifrim that were saying that they're writing a get. So the Gemara wants to understand what is that talking about. So says the Gemara, what was the second case of the Mishnah? Second case was Kasav Legarish as Ishtoi v'nimlach v'chulu. Person that wrote a get for his wife and then he changed his mind. He's not using it. V'chulu. What did the Mishnah say? Someone else says, let me use the get that you wrote for your wife because I have the same name. My wife has the same name. Now the question is, Ve'el Reisha b'mai. So what's the case of the Reisha? Wasn't the Reisha the same thing? That he overheard Seifrim that were writing a get for one person, and now he wants to go ahead and use it because that person is not using it, so it seems to be the exact same case as the first case of the Mishnah. Amar Rav Papa says, Rav Papa, no, that's not what it is. The first case of the Mishnah, we're not talking about a husband that's writing a get for his wife, we're talking about the Seifrim that are just training themselves to write a get. So over here, it's not written for the purpose of Gedishin at all. In the second case, it's written for the purpose of a Gedishin. It's just not written for your wife, or for you, it's written for someone else. That's the difference between the first and second case of the Mishnah. Amar Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi Deik Nami, I can prove this to you from the language of the Mishnah. The Tani, the Mishnah says, Seifrin Makrin, that you have over here Seifrin. So one is reading to the other, which means you have a Seifr that's already an expert, and he's like reading and showing the other how to write this get. V'leikatani Seifrin Kairin. And it doesn't say that the Seifrim are reading the get that they themselves wrote. So we could see that we're talking about an older or a more experienced Seifr that's training another Seifr to write the get. Shema Mina, so that teaches me the Pshat in the Mishnah. So the Gemara explains, so ma yesa mikain. Why, when the Mishnah comes to the second case, and then the third and the fourth case, why does the Mishnah use the expression of yeser mikain, that it's a bigger chiddush? Why is it a bigger chiddush? So Rabbi Shmuel explained as follows. The first case is loizeh, not only the first case, shenichtav shaloi l'shum gerishin. It wasn't written for the purpose of any divorce at all. It was just simply practicing how to write a get. That's the first case. So not only that, what's the chiddush of the second case? Ela avzeh, even in the second case, shenichtav l'shum gerishin. It was written for the purpose of a divorce, but it wasn't written for this ish and this isha. Still, it's going to be pasal, because it's not enough to write it l'shem gerishin. It has to be written l'shem this ish and isha. And then comes the third case, v'loi zeh shenichtav shaloi l'shem gerishin. Didei, not only this, the second case where we said that it was written for the purpose of divorce, but it wasn't written for the purpose of this divorce, of this ish and isha. Ela av zeh shenichtav l'shem gerishin didei. In the third case, it was written for this man. It wasn't written for this woman, but it was written for this man. Still, it's going to be possible because it also has to be written for this woman, for l'shem this isha. And then comes the fourth case. V'loi zeh shaloi nichtav l'shem gerishin hu. Not only this case over here, which was not written l'shem gerishin, okay, or or it wasn't written l'shem this isha, ela av zeh shenichtav l'shum geirushin. It's written for this geirushin who is still ha puzzle. Still, it's going to be puzzle. Okay, so the lashon of the Gemara over here is not so clear, but what the Gemara is trying to say over here, the last case over here, what the Gemara is saying is v'lo zeh shalei nichtav l'shem geirushin for this woman. Right. So even though the geirushin over here, the last geirushin was written for geirushin, it was written for the ish, and it was written for one of these two women. We just don't know which one of them. But he told them, I'm going to be using it for one of these women. But still, it's going to be possible because we don't know for sure which woman it was written for. It's going to be possible. Shalei nichtav, again, av zeh shenichtav l'shem geirushin ha, possible. Even though it was written for this, that's how you read the Gemara again. V'lo zeh shalei nichtav l'shem geirushin ha, ela av zeh shenichtav l'shem geirushin ha, it was written over here for this man and for one of his women. Still, it's going to be possible because we don't know for sure which woman he's going to use it for. Says the Gemara, my timer. What's the source of this? Where do we see in the pasuk that the halacha of lishma is to this extent that it's not enough that it's written l'shem geirushin, but it has to be written l'shem ish and l'shem isha, and you have to know for sure which isha it's for. What's the source of this? Says the Gemara as follows: I kasav, if the Torah would have said v'nasan sefer krisis biyada, give a sefer krisis, give the get into her hands, and the Torah would not say v'kasav and it would not say law. It would just say v'nasan sefer krisis biyada. Then havamine. Then I would say lumute ha'eich kama. That all this pasuk is coming to say is that it's the only case that would be possible is the first case. Why? The le'avad l'shum krisis. Because the first case is a get that wasn't written for the purpose of gerushin at all. The Torah says it has to be a sefer krisis. So that I would know to exclude only the first case. But if the get was written for the purpose of gerushin, to divorce his wife, and then the nimlach, the person changed his mind, the avid l'shum krisus, so the get was written for the purpose of a divorce, ein kasha. Then I would say maybe the get is kasha, as long as it's written for the purpose of krisus. It doesn't have to be written for this ish and isha. So therefore, kasav rachmane v'kasav. So the Torah says v'kasav means that the husband has the right to get, meaning it's not enough l'shem gerushin, it has to be this ish. Now, kasav rachmane v'kasav, but if the Torah would only write v'kasav, havamina, then I would say lumute hai duloi iu kakasav law. So then I would say that it's enough if the husband is the one that writes it, or at least he appoints a sefer to write it for him. But excluding a case, which is the second case of the Mishnah, if this husband is not the one that wrote it, so then the get won't be kosher. What's if it is this husband that wrote it, but he has two different wives? The iu kakasav law, it's him that wrote it. Ein kosher. I would say that the get would be kosher as long as the kasav, as long as the husband wrote it. There's actually a machlokes rishonim about this. When you learn the simple pshat of the Gemara, it seems like the Gemara over here is saying that the husband is the one that has to actually write the get, which would mean when a sefer writes the get for the husband, he has to appoint the sefer to be his shliach to write the get. You need a din of shlichus for that. But other Rishonim argue with this. Taisus before in Daf Chav Beis and Beis, there's a long Taisus about this. He says you don't have to have the sefer be a shliach for you to write the get. But all the Gemara means is that the husband has to tell the sefer to write the get for his sake, that it should be lishma. But what if it's this husband? He has two wives now, so maybe that's okay. He doesn't have to be l'shem this particular isha. So kasav rachmana law. That's where the Torah added the word law lishma. That it's not enough that it has to be l'shem the ish, the husband, but also has to be l'shem this isha. That's the third case of the Mishnah. So that we learn out from law. So again, we have three things there. We have the word krisus that says l'shem gerushin. We have the word v'kasav that means that it has to be the husband that has to say to write it, and we have the word law that has to be l'shem the isha. Now the sefer lamalina, the last case of the Mishnah, what is it coming to say over here when the person has both wives and he says, I'm not sure which wife I'm going to use it for. So the Mishnah said that's also not good. Hakamashmalon, the last case of the Mishnah is telling me the ein breda, that we can't say that retroactively it becomes clarified who he's going to use the get for. At that point he says he doesn't know, so the get is not written lishma. That's the last case of the Mishnah. Okay, we'll stop over here for today.
Did you make a